People say that you need to learn how to draw perspective before you paint, but I'd like to challenge that idea. We're going to be looking at some awesome paintings by Jakub Rozalski and explore what you really need to create art with depth. And hopefully, by the end of this video, I'll have you convinced that linear perspective is simply overrated in creating depth. But first, can we just appreciate these paintings for a moment? Absolutely beautiful. All right, let's jump in. I chose Jakub's paintings for this video because he has this theme of one or two figures in the foreground and then some massive monster off in the distance. There's something so unsettling about it because we typically expect things to scale down in size as they get further away, but if you just take the actual height of the monsters themselves, they're almost always larger than the figure in the foreground, and they create angles that appear to be the opposite of linear perspective. They make you feel small, even though you're the one who's in the front of the painting. These monsters defy our expectations, and defying expectations about linear perspective is what I'm aiming for today. We'll be focusing primarily on this painting by Jakub. We've got this massive ice giant smashing boats to pieces. Vikings and ships have been launched into the air like they weigh nothing. This isn't some slow-moving, dim-witted giant. This giant is a warrior, destroying everything in his path. The harpoons have proved ineffective. The boats are little more than pesky distractions. There's nothing here to convince you that these Vikings stand a chance. And yet here the Viking leader stands, unfazed, defiant. They lock eyes with each other and we find ourselves suspended in this moment. Our imagination takes flight and a story begins to unfurl its sails, pulling us into the painting, into the clutches of the giant where Valhalla awaits us. There's just so much to talk about in this painting, but we're going to focus on that pull, on the technical aspects of depth that draws us in. You can see in Jakub's preliminary sketches that he didn't draw up any linear perspective lines, but the painting has so much depth in it, and there's nothing that appears to be wrong with his perspective. You can see how these ships get smaller and smaller as they go further back. That makes sense. These ships all feel like they're the same size, so there's an approximation of linear perspective going on here. And even though we can't draw perfectly parallel lines here with the rising ocean, different angles of the boats, we can generally guess that the vanishing point is somewhere over here. But what if we take this ship in the back and make it bigger? Wouldn't that mess up the perspective of the painting and make it look flat? Nope. The boat just looks bigger now. It doesn't feel like it's floating in the air directly above the others. It still falls back into place. It hasn't harmed the painting in any way. Huh. Maybe linear perspective isn't as important as people make it out to be. Maybe there's something more going on here that's holding the painting together and still giving it depth. Let's look at another painting. You can see some linear perspective happening between Theseus and Ariadne, but what if I make Ariadne half her original size? That would mess up the perspective and make Ariadne feel too small, right? Not exactly. She doesn't appear to be any smaller compared to Theseus than she was before. She just feels farther away than she was before. It hasn't harmed the painting in any way, but that's a huge difference in size. Surely that should have messed up the linear perspective, right? Maybe there's something more going on here that's holding the painting together and still giving it depth. Okay, what if it's placement? If scale by sizes can be loosely defined, maybe it's placement that needs to be more refined. So let's try moving this big boat around. I can move it here, I can move it here, I can even move it over here. But I can't move it into these areas since they immediately clash with the rest of what's going on. So there are some limitations. I wonder what those limitations are. Let's inch our way up and see how far we can get. This works, this works, this doesn't work. That's interesting. The moment it gets in front of the ice giant's leg, it appears to be wrong. Wait, but this boat is just in front of the leg and it's smaller. So placement and size seem to be secondary in creating depth, secondary to something else. And of course, that doesn't mean that they don't matter. Where something is in a painting and what size it is super important in a painting. But what I'm trying to illustrate is that there's something more significant at work here that fully creates the illusion of depth. So I decided to set up my own image to help us discover what really creates depth. Here's little Timmy playing catch with an inflatable Death Star ball. Use your imagination with me here. And the question is, can we make this Death Star feel like it's further away without changing its size or placement? And we can, so much so that we can put this Death Star into space. Now little Timmy's planet is in danger from the galactic empire. I did this using what's called atmospheric depth or atmospheric perspective, which is commonly known in the art world, but rarely explained in simple terms. But I was given a really simple method that I want to share with you. First, I need to give credit to the art teacher who taught me everything that I know, Kevin Murphy. Kevin is the co-founder of Evolve Artists, which is an online art school that can get you to pro-level skills in 1 year. Kevin taught me that everything has 3 moving parts, 3 fundamentals that are present in everything you look at: value, edge, and color. Look around you. Everything you see is just value, edge, and color. That's it. There's nothing else. We have a playlist unpacking these fundamentals, but stay with me because I used those 3 things to push the Death Star back into space. The most important one is values, and those are easiest to see in grayscale because values are simply how light or how dark something is. Notice how the values become more like the sky, more like the atmosphere as they go back into space. But when we bring it back into color, we can see that the color also needs to become more blue, like the sky. Finally, there's edges, and I'll blow out this edge to create a more dense atmosphere in between, pushing it back. This works because soft edges push things back, while sharp edges tend to pull things forward. Now let's return to Jakub's paintings and see if we can see these fundamentals at work. Look at how the values diminish as they go further into the distance, and the colors as well. Even the brush strokes get looser, less defined as they recede. Art is all about relationships, one thing relative to another. It's kind of like cooking where you have to hold these relationships in harmony with each other. And here we are determining which relationships matter the most. These 3 things are the ingredients to creating depth. And you can see how Jakub utilizes them beautifully in all of his paintings. In a way, they determine the sizes and the placement of the things you perceive in the paintings. Knowing these tools gives Jakub a kind of freedom with his compositions that pulls us into the stories he's telling with his art. Here's what my art teacher has to say.
Artists were drawing perspective long before there was a mathematical formula for it. I prefer to teach students how to see so they can paint perspective based on how they see it, not based on a formula. It's like anatomy. If you want to learn how to paint and draw the human figure, don't open an anatomy book. Draw and paint the figure. Make sense of what you see first. Then when you have answers, use the anatomy book to answer a question, but don't go there for all of your data. Same with color theory. Like color theory, when you open a book on color theory, it is an infinite range of color, but the palette that you work with doesn't offer you that. It offers you a very controlled range. And so it's better to learn how to mix colors with your palette of paint because it's finite, rather than looking at color theory, which is infinite. And so to me, I like to go to color theory when I run into a problem I can't solve, but not to go there to learn how to mix color. And I feel that way about a lot of things. And so perspective, we don't teach perspective, but you will learn to see it with your eyes. You'll recognize it when you see it. As with all things, once you become more capable of seeing, which is what our program does for you. And then if you want to backfill what you can see with additional data, then I would recommend picking up a very basic book on perspective. And I would tell you that any book more than, say, 6 pages on perspective is overkill.
Once again, I'm not here to say that linear perspective is a useless tool for your skill set, but I'd argue that many people overestimate its value compared to simpler, more powerful fundamentals, especially for beginners. But hopefully this discussion makes you wonder what else is out there that you were told is important, but is actually hindering your results. Everyone says you need to draw before you paint, but this simply isn't true. Get a grip on the fundamentals first, and you'll be better equipped to learn drawing. It's one of the many things we do differently at Evolve to get results so fast for our students. Evolve teaches proportional drawing from life, which is more broad in its application of drawing than simply linear perspective. For example, if you learn proportional drawing from life, you'll have the skills to draw linear perspective, but not the other way around necessarily. Proportional drawing brings us back to cooking, where you see things in relationship with each other and have harmony together. You can accurately manage the size and placement of objects as they relate to each other. Whereas linear perspective has a more narrow application. It's ideal for right angles and architectural drawings, but it's a tool that can easily become a crutch. If you're curious about what else you might be missing in your growth as an artist, then I'd recommend you watch this video I made called The 3 Biggest Mistakes That Keeps Artists Back from Reaching Pro Art Skills. You can find the link in the description. But if you simply want to learn more about how to use these 3 fundamentals to create depth and further detail, then you can watch this video I made. I say it's about landscapes, but it actually applies to any subject matter. Thank you for watching, everyone, and thank you, Jakub, for making awesome narrative paintings. Happy painting, everyone.